Hello everyone, I'm Shirzad. I'm a technical artist here at EA Sport, and I work specifically on Formula One since I joined EA from 2023. And I was lucky to be able to work with an amazing team that allowed me and trusted me to work on the character quality. It was a big task when I joined. My manager was like, "You sure? Do you want to do this? This is like a big task. We can start with smaller tasks, but I like to involve with bigger challenges." And I'm glad that they trusted me with this. So a bit of introduction like about me. So I started as a 3D generalist. I like to paint, I like to model, and I started as an architectural in architectural visualization. That's how I got into 3ds Max, but then I quickly realized there's much more into 3ds Max, and it's not just about visualizing houses and designs, which is really nice, but I needed more. And then I realized there's more room here as well. So that's where I started to get into coding as well, which was a nice thing because it shaped my career to become a technical artist from a 3D generalist. The interesting part about that is because I knew about the art and 3D and modeling, and I added the coding afterwards, that helped a lot to be able to have a good understanding of what the art is and what the coding is, like these, how to bridge them together. And I got an opportunity to work for Killworks from Edinburgh, which was making a game called Signy All Guns Blazing for Konami. And then after that, I got the offer to work as a technical artist for Electronic Arts from 2023. Before I dive into the webinar, I'd like to mention that this was a team effort. None of these things, even if I'm the one who developed the tool or the script, none of it is just me. It's a team effort, an amazing team of engineers, directors, animators, and character artists work together to provide what I'm about to present. So what I'm going to mention today and what we're going to be walking through is, first, what are we trying to achieve? So what's the weakness? What are we trying to fix? And then why it mattered, the new solution, what was it providing that we needed it? And then I mentioned 3 key challenges, which were really important because these challenges, I mean, we had many challenges, but I broke it down into 3 main ones, which explains the difficulty of what we had to go through, because we had hundreds of animations, we had hundreds of characters, we needed to upgrade and update all of those, and we had to batch process them because we're not a really big team working on Formula One. So the time saving was really important. We had to develop tools to save our time. I do mention toolings and automation process that we did, mostly in 3ds Max, but also in Motion Builder as well. And I do mention the retargeting pipeline, which we had to develop to be able to use our existing animations, because we don't want to redo all the animations. We don't have the resource, we don't have the time for it. And then at the end, I do mention some of the results and some of the lessons learned from the process. So first, let's see what we wanted to fix. And this is our legacy rig, which held up for a while. It worked really well. It does still work, but it's a tech. We need to involve it. We need to improve it. We need to keep up with it, because other games are getting better, even though Formula One is focused on a racing game, but we do have characters, and believable characters are really important for the game, right? So there are a few main challenges, or let's say issues, with what we had before. I will quickly mention some of them. So you can see the deformation is not ideal. For instance, deformation around the elbow, even though it looks okay, but when I bend the elbow, there's no deformation in the bicep, or there's no deformation in the forearm. There is some twist that might make you think like, well, it does work well, but the only actual deformation happening is only at the elbow. And then you can see a more extreme version of it on the knee deformation. Well, I do know knee won't bend like that, so we do need to change that. The problem is when we start implementing secondary deformations for this, I need to manually script them and code them, which is okay, but then the problem is I need to do the exact same thing in Motion Builder as well, because our animator used that, and to get the same deformation in Max, we need to implement the same logic. And then again, the problem is we need to do the same thing in Ego as well. So every single change requires us to update the same logic or try to implement the same logic 3 different places. And that's not maintainable, that's not expandable. So that's another problem we had. And also the rig was a bit old. We needed to refresh. We need to use new tech, especially after we joined EA from Codemasters. And since we joined EA, we had access to more tools, which is a shared tech by central EA teams. One of them is Sapien. And what's Sapien? It's what we are going to be using in our game. So why did we want to migrate? As you can see here, this is the new rig we wanted to use. For instance, the rig is fully customizable. It's not based on any plugin. It's basically a custom rig that we can expand as much as we want. And then it provides really good deformation. As you can see, on the right side, you can have proper shoulder deformation, wrist deformation, and the knee will bend properly. And there's an on and off switch there. When I turn it on, you can see the volume is preserved properly. So that's another thing that this tech will give us. And also there are a lot of benefits to this. It does have advanced secondary deformation. It's a pose-based deformation logic that I can edit, or whoever who's working on this, they can add as much as they want. And this is unlimited basically. And it's kind of really cheap to calculate. So it does run in real time. And that's a good thing because we save a lot of memory on not having animation for every single joint. We can calculate how it should look like in real time. It's also physically accurate because the joint placement is based on an actual skeleton. So where the shoulders are, where the wrist bones is extremely accurate because it's been placed exactly where it's supposed to be. And it's a unified EA shared tech, which means that we can use other titles' animations because it's the same skeleton. We can share the tooling they have. So anything that they have that works with this system, we can kind of borrow it, which is nice. So it's scalable and future-proof as well. So next is the key challenges. This is basically the core of the presentation. So I'll go through 3 of them, even though we had many challenges, but I reduced it to these 3, and I will walk you through each challenge with the tooling we did for each of these and how it looked like. So first is the rig replacement. I have to change the rig. The rig we have is the old one. It contains multiple layers, maybe dozens or hundreds of nodes. They are connected, they are scripted. It's really difficult to get rid of and also replace it with a new, fresh skeleton. We needed to do that in a way that we don't break anything that's already in use. Because while I'm working on this for future game, the other games or live up is still using the same tech. So I cannot break anything. We have to keep everything intact. And then the other challenge is mesh reproportioning. So why is this a case? Because the new skeleton is 10 centimeters taller, almost 10 centimeters taller than what we had. And that height difference introduces a lot of challenges, which I will mention in a bit. And I will mention the height difference a lot because that was a big challenge. And then animation retargeting, which is, again, the height difference is one of the most difficult things to deal with here because the animations don't apply anymore. And we have hundreds of animations, which some of them have dozens of animation for characters in each of them. So basically thousands of animation will be useless unless we can retarget them. So I'll go through all these challenges one by one. So first, the rig replacement. So as you can see on the left, I have multiple layers. It's actually based on biped from Max, which again, as I mentioned, it holds up really well, but it's limited to Max and it's limited to the logic we need to code in Max, and then we need to repeat the same thing. So same reasons. So we need to get rid of that. And deleting those is not as simple as just selecting and deleting, because they are connections. There are expressions that are linked together. There are dependencies. So deleting them is a bit difficult to do by hand. So we had to write a code that does that and gets rid of the connections, deletes them, cleans the scene, optimizes it, and restructures the layers basically. And then on the right side, you see multiple modifiers. These also are really important because modifiers, they are there because they serve a purpose. I cannot just delete that. I cannot replace it. Other tools are using this, and other tools are expecting that modifier to be on that specific mesh. So we need to update the meshes, the proportions and skeleton in a way that doesn't break anything, because again, the tools that we use expect those modifiers to be there. And after that, we have the DCC tools that we need to make them compatible with what we are doing while keeping everything intact again, because other teams are using them, are constantly building characters, working on them. We shouldn't be breaking any of that. So what we did was just a checkbox to, if I'm checking this, then start using the new one. So while everything still works the same, there is a if statement, there is a checkbox that lets me be able to work with the new tech and keep it going while everything else is still working. And then at the end, we need to perform a proper skin weight painting, because it doesn't matter how good the tech is, if we do not have a proper artistic eye which goes through and like paints all the weights properly, it will not look good. So we need to do that too, and that also requires some tooling, which I will be mentioning in a bit. So before mentioning these two challenges, the challenge A and B are a bit connected, and we wrote a tool that kind of did both of them at the same time. So I will be mentioning challenge B before mentioning the tools that we wrote for both of these challenges. So the other one is mesh reproportioning. Sorry, I had to censor many of those because there are team names for Formula One and I had to do that. So mesh reproportioning is again the case because we have height difference, which means if your head is 10 centimeters higher now, you need to move that head. And it's not as simple as just scaling something because the proportions will look off. So we need to skin wrap that, and we need to move it in a way that fits the new skeleton as well, and the joint placement and everything works. So we had hundreds of assets to reproportion, which is not a wise idea to do by hand. It's not even possible. And all assets do require the skin weight painted. Also, they do have LODs as well. So it's not just, let's say we have around 10 geometries per each character. Those 10 geometries, you need to multiply them by 6 because we have 6 LODs as well. So there's a lot of manual work that we should be able to batch. We usually just copy whatever weight we painted for the highest LOD and then paste it to the lower ones. You will get away with it most of the case unless something is seriously wrong with it, which you can just fix by hand afterwards. Skin weights were authored in Maya because Dorani, who was from Central Tech, who did the skin paints, she was comfortable in Maya. So she did the painting in Maya, but we wrote a tool that converts those weights from Maya to 3ds Max and loads it in Max and applies it to the meshes, because our sources live in 3ds Max. And then all updated assets then need to get exported because they are just sources. We need to build them for the game engine, which our game engine is called Ego. I don't know even if a lot of people know about the game engine we have, unfortunately, but it's an amazing tech. I do like to mention it more. So challenge A and B were kind of related because you do update the skeleton and then you reproportion. So we wrote a tool named Sapienizer, which automated a lot of this. It wasn't a case for batch processing. I couldn't get the whole thing like in a batch process because let's say the source files had a lot of edge cases, like the names were maybe off in some cases, or the modifiers were named differently. Small problem will cause an issue when you batch process, which I will get into later as well. This is really important. For example, this tool, it does a few things. One of them is it gets rid of the whole legacy rig in one click. So I can delete biped and it does get rid of everything, the connections. And it does reproportion meshes as well. So imagine if you were to do this by hand. For example, as I mentioned, there is like 40 geometry per each character. I need to select one of those geometries. I need to export it. I need to wrap it to the new proportion. I need to bring it back, apply modifiers, apply materials, which is really difficult to do by hand because I need to keep that modifier in the RAM while playing with the mesh and replacing it and then bringing it back and then pasting them. So there's a lot of work. And after doing the whole thing, I have 40 to go for only one character, even though I have around how many, maybe hundreds of these characters. So it's not possible to do by hand. So this tool was doing that. You could select all the meshes and process them in one go. And it reproportions everything for you. As you can see, after it's done processing, it fits properly with the new height of the new character and the new base mesh. And that was giving us a really clean starting point for our character team. So in case they do need any manual work, it's going to be really minimum. Challenge C, which was one of the biggest challenge, was the animation retargeting. Again, height difference was this big problem that we had to basically consider in every single step. So we have hundreds of animations that need to be retargeted. As I've mentioned before, some of these animations have dozens of animation inside them. So for example, the second photo you can see from left, that's only half of the animations. And that's probably 500 frames animation. And so let's say 20 characters in one animation, hundreds of those animations, so basically thousands of animation that needs to be processed and retargeted. And all of that takes a lot of time, especially if you want to do that manually, which I don't think it's even possible. And then again, height difference, as you can see here, I'm showing you visually like how it looks. And in the next slide, I'll visually show you what challenges it produces when do you have this height difference. And then the photo on the right is the bulk retargeter, is the tool that we wrote. It's a part of the chain or a workflow or a pipeline we wrote that work together to do the retargeting, which I will mention in depth, because that was, I think I'll say it was the biggest challenge for me, at least personally. So again, height difference. As you can see in this single example, this is probably the simplest one. It's just one driver getting out of the car and celebrating. So let's say this is the first place. So he's supposed to celebrate. He gets out of the cockpit, which his hand is holding onto it. And that is a problem already because the new character, which is the green one, is taller. So if he's doing the same thing, he cannot even reach the cockpit. So he needs to change the posture to be able to grab to that. And then when he stands up, then that changes, because if he tries to keep the contact, since he's taller, his hand is not fully like raised and he doesn't look happy, or he's like hesitant, like, should I be happy after winning this game? So that's a problem. We need to have different settings even for one animation in one animation file. When I say animation, is animation for the character. When I say animation file, is an animation file which might contain multiple animations for characters. So in the series of tools we wrote, the first step is to be able to build templates. This is important. When I say template, I'm talking about let's say the mesh, the geometry, the character visual looks of the character when I mention template. Because there are other templates in Motion Builder, which I'm referring as settings, as I will mention in the next slide. So what we do here, we assemble the character. It's reproportioned. The skeleton has been replaced and it's skinned, but that's it. There's no logic behind this. This is just a source FBX we export. The build character template in Motion Builder, what it does, it grabs that source that we exported from 3ds Max, it characterizes it, and it hooks up all the controllers. So the facial controllers, the plane shapes, everything are connected together, and it's ready to be used in a T-pose. But that's it. It doesn't do anything else with it. It just stores a template for that specific character. Then you can name it. You can say, this is the driver, this is the crew, this is the boss, this is the casual look, this is the crowd. So you can create as many templates as you want. And then we need to be able to create different settings, which I'll mention in the next slide, what the settings are and why do we need them. So for instance, in this simple animation, someone is interacting with an object, right? If we want to retarget that, it requires its own settings. That character is holding on to something. If I'm a taller person and if I do the same thing, I have an offset. My hands won't grab into that object. So the hands need to be IK. And then the knee needs to be a bit bent, the back needs to be bent, the head needs to tilt downward to look at what he's looking at because I'm taller now. So those differences are the case for every single one of them, depending on what they're doing. So the same character will have different behavior across different animations. There's nothing that is properly set and we can use it in like one go. Everything is changing in every single animation. So what this tool does is it imports temporarily, imports the template we just created and assigns it to this character. You can see how that looks. You can set the settings for it, the IK or FK basically being contact preserving or pose preserving. You can set all of those things and then you can store it. These settings could be as generic as saying, consider all of it IK. So the legs will be the same for all the height difference. The hands will be the same. They grab into the same thing. And they can be as specific as saying, well, the left arm is IK. I want the right arm to be something else, for instance. So, and then you can just name them. And these will be used across all the animations. It's not just one time. You can use them multiple times. And then at some point you have enough settings to just simply select from. As you can see on the right side, I have multiple one of those and they have different names. This is used and created by our animation team. So they could decide how many they wanted. They create them and they can just pick. So you see, as I select and click on them, the retargeted character looks different. The way it back bends, the way it grabs into something, whatever it is, it's just different. And you can set all of those things and store them. And so far we have template and we have settings. And what do we do with them? We have another main tool which combines all of those results. And its name is bulk retargeter. What it does is the animator goes and opens the animation file. And then it grabs all the characters. Let's say in this one, there's like 20 characters. It lists all the characters. What you can do is you assign a template, which, as I mentioned, is the visual presentation of that character. It can be a driver, it can be a crew, it can be anything. And then you assign the setting you want to retarget it with. But you do not retarget it because retargeting takes time. It will occupy the system, the machine of the animator. It will waste their time. So you just basically save the config for it. They can see how it looks like with the setting manager. They've already done that part. So they can just assign these. This is exactly how they want it to be retargeted. And then they store it. That information will be stored in the same Motion Builder file. And then bulk retargeter has another mode named bulk retarget mode. The first one was current scene retarget, which you can go and set these settings. This one is bulk retarget, is basically when everything is ready, I go and give it a list of animations to retarget. So what it does is it goes through every single file that I referenced to, and it checks if there is a config file for it. If there is a config file, it applies the same settings. It grabs the template, it applies the setting, and it retargets it. But it does it on a dedicated service machine. It's much faster, it's much stronger, it has a lot of RAM, a lot of memory, a really good speed, internet speed. So it's much faster than doing it one by one. It is basically impossible to do it one by one. And if there is a setting for that specific file, it will grab those settings and apply it. If there is no setting, it falls back to a generic one. Well, by the time you forget to set a setting for a character, it's probably generic enough anyways. So it falls back to a generic one. And it retargets it anyway. So everything gets retargeted. If there is a setting, it follows the rule. If there is no setting, it goes to the fallback one. And the first time I did run this, I ran it on 700 animation files on a weekend. I came back on Monday, I saw nothing. Even Motion Builder wasn't open, and I was so confused. I didn't even know how many animations I've processed. I didn't know where it broke, why it broke. There was no information for me to use. And this is where I learned I needed a logging system. And that was a big mistake, which I will be mentioning at the end of the presentation because those mistakes were important to address. So I added a logging system, which every time it does anything, it logs it for me. So I know when it opens the scene, I know when it's processing it, I know when it's saving it, and wherever it breaks, I'll know where it broke. I know how many I've processed. So the first crash was interestingly because of the RAM. It was loading everything, but it wasn't like getting rid of any information that it had previously, which the service machine, because it has a lot of RAM, I didn't realize it for the first few hours, but then when I came back on Monday, it was big enough to crash the tool. So that's where I realized I did need a logging system from the beginning. And after that, we exported everything. And this is what we got in the game. It does not look good, but if you work enough in the industry, you realize this is good news because it means you have something going on in the game. Even though they look horrible, but I was happy with this because it means we did it. Something is in the game. And after this is just iteration. For instance, I had to go through these animations a few times, try to retarget them again, find what's wrong with them, go through it again, one iteration, find another thing, this is also wrong, I need to go and like fix it again. So I think overall I ran probably 4 or 5 iterations of retargeting. It did not take long, it was probably 3 or 4 days for the whole retargeting processing, but at the end of the day, it just provided what I wanted. So here is what you have now. On the right side, we have the old one. So old character, as you can see, when it bends on the elbow, the only deformation happens only at the elbow. It looks okay. I don't think anyone will realize if there's no comparison next to it, that there's probably something wrong with that. But there is no deformation on the forearm. There is no deformation for the bicep, tricep, or anything else. But in the middle, we have the Sapien one, which, as you can see, when it bends the elbow, it affects the bicep. It stretches the tricep, and it affects the forearm as well. And basically, you have unlimited options. I can push this as much as I want to a point that it's not even visible anymore. So you have unlimited option to just iterate through this as much as you want. On the left side, there are two other GIFs that on top, the solver is disabled. So you don't see any of those secondary deformation. As you can see, when I raise the arm, it breaks the shoulder. But on the bottom side, you can see the nodes are changing, are deforming based on what I do. So basically everything I'm doing, it's all just grabbing the wrist and changing it. But everything else is deforming based on that simple change. And it is a pose-based deformation. Basically, I can introduce as many poses as I want, and I can paint them. It's like an artist, you go through it, you'll add as much as you want. And then when this was done, this is the final results. So we have a walk cycle applied to the new animation, we have a walk cycle applied to the new skeleton with reproportioned meshes, materials, everything is the same. And the whole thing is running on the new tech now. So I don't know what the frame rate looks like for you, but it's really fluid. It looks really realistic. The deformation are how they're supposed to be. And here is the same thing for the driver. And the nice thing is, this is an animation we stole from another title, which I won't be saying which title, but that's the good thing about this, because now we can use other titles' animations as well. The same way that we can retarget our animations or get their animations, the same way we can use their tooling and everything else. So this is what we got at the end. And there are a few things I'd like to mention. If I had the opportunity to go back and do this again, I mean, no one has this luxury, right? But I'm saying this, maybe you are next, maybe you need to do this. So first thing I realized is communication was key. We did have really good communication in our team, thankfully. But I realized it's about me. I need to push as someone who's given a task. I need to push for more information. I need to provide info. I need to provide my own input as well. Because if I just see them as simple checkboxes, a task that I just need to do because I've been given, well, it's a one step out of 100 to get somewhere. I might get that step towards the wrong direction, and I will never know, because I get the task done. Technically, I'm done, but it's not in the right direction. So that was one of the things I realized that I needed to do better personally. And the batch processing, in terms of batch processing, I realized I do need proper logging. So every time now I do any batch processing, I will have a logging system. I need to know what goes wrong. I need to know when it goes wrong or why it goes wrong and what happened. So I need proper error handling as well. And I need to make it error prone based, not error prone, bulletproof, to make sure that if there is an error in one of those files, I'm not breaking the whole batch process. I'll skip it, but I will let the user know, by the way, there was a file that we failed to process. Look into it later. And the last point I would like to make is that anytime if I want to do that now again, if I'm given a task or a tool to develop, I will write what it needs to do, why I'm doing this, what's the input, what's the operation, and what's the result. It might sound simple, but it will save you a lot of time. And again, I was really happy and lucky that I got the chance to work on this, and I can't wait to see the results in the game properly when it's released and it's out there. And that's the whole presentation. And with that, I will give it back to Lucas.
Yeah, thank you, Shirzad. This is great. Thank you so much for sharing this. And it was really, really awesome to see all the different breakdowns, challenges that you shared, and just what the team went through to, create all of that. And with that, yeah, now it's time to jump into questions. So if you guys haven't any questions, please drop them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. That way we can get to them. And I actually already see a question popping up from Boyan. So this question says, from what I understand, the bulk retargeter creates a new Sapien rig in Motion Builder. If all the rigs were already updated in Motion Builder, why did the team decide to re-import to 3ds Max instead of migrating to Maya, especially since mentioned the riggers are more comfortable using Maya?
So F1 specifically, we do use 3ds Max as our main DCC. The whole tooling, almost all of it, like I can say 90% of what I've worked is in 3ds Max. And it's more at the end of the day, I mean, this is my personal opinion. At the end of the day, it's about where you're comfortable working with. I can work with Maya, but me personally, I'll pick Max. Like whenever there's a task that I can do in Max, I'll definitely do it in Max because I'm just much faster there. I'm much more comfortable in there. So the only thing we did in Maya was that for this process, for the transferring, was the painting. And the person who did the skin painting, the person who did this was comfortable in that. And the whole input and output was on skin weight, which we could simply just convert. And we had one button in Maya says copy, and then one button in Max says paste. And that's how quick it was. So we could get rid of like not migrating to Maya completely. We keep everything in 3ds Max. All the sources are
Nice.
there. The meshes are there. The way we even export animations, we use selection sets, which it doesn't exist the same way in Maya as well. We do have material IDs, which is again not the same way in Maya. So if we want to migrate that to Maya, everything, it will be an unnecessary amount of work that we don't have a reason to do at the moment.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks, Prasad, and thank you for the question. Also from the audience as well too. So what do you think for indie developers? Will they be able to use this type of tech in the future, or do you think AI will be something that does this kind of task as well further on?
I don't think AI will do this. This is again my personal opinion, but I would say maybe machine learning will be able to give you some kind of deformation. But as an indie developer, as someone who does indie work myself, I do develop indie games. I do work on personal projects a lot. I don't think to this extent is applicable to what we do as an individual. It's too much to deal with. The only the deformation is a whole technology which has been working on for years by Darren Rudy and his team, which is interestingly, you do have another talk in depth about the same tech we just mentioned that we implemented here. It's been done by Darren Rudy and his team, which you can link later for people who joined here.
Yes, I'll
So
find it right now for everyone.
if you go through that, you see this is too much to implement in an indie work. You can, but I don't think the scope is manageable.
Nice. Yeah, thanks, Shazad. That actually might, it's a good find. I think it's another question I just caught as well too from Rafal. So can you touch more on ML deformers more specifically, more than he's wondering if like how they make sense within this process as well. I know you mentioned it in your answer a little bit, but wondering if you can touch more on the use of ML deformers for this work.
So ML deformance, if you're talking about machine learning, because I'm not an expert in Maya, so I don't know if there is there is something called ML deformer in Maya. I'm not aware of that. I'm also restricted by how much I can say, but I can just say I don't have the answer yet that we are going for that or not. We do like to know the answer too, but that's how much I can share, unfortunately.
Yeah, no problem at all. Totally understand. Another question actually from Abir and from the audience. How does a rigging of model can be done in an easier way for like a solo developer? Do you have any suggestions on how, a smaller team can do this kind of work?
So that's actually really interesting because there are a lot of tools now that you can use. Uh, Biped is one example in 3ds Max. It depends on what you use, right? I think in Maya it's called Human IK as well. Those tools and plugins and scripts give you enough to use, and they honestly are probably even more powerful than you even need at all. Like you won't ever need that much uh, functionality, but you still get all of that. So my favorite is Cat in 3ds Max, and it is actually we did use it in production. You can see that in my previous webinar with Autodesk. Actually, it was when we were presenting Signy, All Guns Blazing, where we did the whole system in Cat. So it's as simple as selecting the type of character you want, and you can just say, I want a leg, it creates a leg for you. I want an arm, it creates an arm for you. I want a tail, it creates the tail for you. And then you just skin that. So I would say it's pretty accessible for an indie developer or an animator or whoever who is not completely aware or like advanced rigger. You can get a really good result with those. For instance, cat or biped. My pick will be cat.
Nice. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Another question also from the same person as well too. Loves the questions, so keep them coming through. According to you, which is the best like free source engine for developing a game?
Free source engine. Well, I need to mention this is not about EA anymore, a disclaimer. This is again now only my opinion. Uh, I don't use any open source engines. I do use Unity personally, and I don't have an idea. I think Godot is doing well, but that's all I know because I'm not a user of Godot. Personally, I do use Unity, and I love the simplicity.
Great. Yeah, thank you for sharing. I guess I also tying back to your experience in Max, because from what it sounds like, you've shared so many fun things about how you like the tool and how it can be great for, in production, but also for any developers using it. Curious, how long have you been using Max for? And one, like, what is your, I guess, your favorite thing about using in the tool that you've mentioned? And I guess, like, trying to introduce it as well to some studios you've been a part of. You mentioned the previous work you did at Keelworks. So yeah, curious if you want to share maybe some cool stories if you want for Max.
Oh, yes. I love that. So I do remember the first version of 3ds Max I got my hands on was 2007. And that's the first time I opened the interface and I didn't know English. And it took me 2 years, sorry, 2 years, 2 weeks to create a sphere. And the sphere is the first button that you see because I didn't know English. I didn't know that's how you create a sphere. But I loved this so much that I just wanted to create something. I do remember how I got into it was like a friend of mine when we were going back from school was like, "Do you know there's a software that they make animation with?" I was like, "Oh, I didn't know that." And that's how I got to know about 3ds Max. And that was really interesting for me because it was my first interaction with 3D basically. And that basically made my career or my whole life is like based on that. Like all my contents now is based on 3ds. I usually say that I grew up in Max because I actually did. Like that's how where I started learning how to code. Max script was the first scripting language I started, and then 3ds Max implemented or let's say integrated Python as well. So that's how I learned Python as well. So basically, I owe 3ds Max for knowing these things that I know so far. But yeah, it's been many years. I used 3ds Max since 2007.
Love it. Yeah, that's a great story. Also, another question just popped in from the audience too. So was any manual retarget cleanup necessary after running the bulk retargeter? Were there specific cleanup decisions that couldn't be automated and required more manual animation cleanup?
Yes, yes. It definitely does manual cleanup. I would say every single batch retarget we do, unless it's an extremely either simple or automatable process, all of them will need proper inspection afterwards, especially animation. So one case, a good case of this is the same driver where he was getting out of the car. When you get out, you do need this different setting. When you're out of the car, you do need a different setting. And we couldn't automate that because there is no point. So why? Uh, the settings is just one setting it applies to whole animation. The template is one template that applies to them, right? So it's like one setting, one layer applied to the whole 500 animation, 500 frames of animation. So the limitation here is I needed to be able to animate the settings because it was doing two different things required two different settings. Not different templates, but different settings. But then what's the point of doing that? Because that's already manual work. If I'm going through that and setting a key that to this point use IK and then to this point use FK, if I need an animation that's so specific and so obvious that you need to do that for, then that's not batchable anymore because you're going through that anyways. So you need to do that after you've done the first batch retargeting. Basically, it gives you a nice starting point that you can go through as an animator and find what's wrong and fix it by hand.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Love it. I'm seeing a lot more questions coming through. This is great, guys. Keep them coming. We love
Yeah,
questions.
nice
Um,
questions.
Of course, yeah. So this one actually another question too from Abir, and actually might touch more on all the indie artists I think who are joining us today as well too. But as you've been working in the game industry for several years now, do you have some advice for like getting started and also reaching to the level that you have now working at EA, and I guess some tips that you can share with some of the fellow artists, freelancing or solo developing on their side?
Yes, I do have an advice for that. So one thing is compared to when I started, now learning is so easy and accessible. And you can, if there is a question in your head, there's definitely an answer somewhere in the internet for it. So it's good and bad at the same time because I see a lot of people who get confused and they are in a like a black hole that they keep learning, but they don't use it. They think there's a lack of knowledge, but the fact is, the reality is you can't ever learn everything. Like I've basically lived in Max, as I mentioned, but I do not know the whole thing because it has many different aspects. I will never be able to know everything in 3ds Max because while I'm learning this as one person, probably 500 people in Autodesk are developing it more and more, and I will never be able to catch up. And especially now with all this new content with AI and everything, people get lost in learning and they think it's about lack of knowledge. It's not true. What I will recommend, which is a practical one, which I did personally and it worked and it taught me a lot, is pick a simplest game in your if you're a game developer, pick the simplest idea you have and make that one. And try to keep the scope like that. That's the difficult part because we tend to like try to get more into the game and we say, well, this is there, but let me add this, and then let me add this, let me add this, and that gets out of scope and you will never be able to finish it. But the interesting thing is, the game that you think it's extremely simple, when you go through the whole process, you'll see how more complex than you think it was. Trying to make saving systems, trying to make board for like who scored the best, like trying to be able to make profiles, try to even have a menu. You will see different aspects of a game by creating the simplest one possible. But if you pick a bigger game, you'll probably never be able to finish and you'll never be able to like see different aspects of it.
Nice, thanks for that. That was some great advice. Next question too, coming in from Mark. So what does Python add to the process of making tools that are not present in MaxScript?
In MaxScript. So Python's power comes mostly from the libraries it has, the modules you can use. For instance, I personally use it mostly because of the interface. And if I want to interact with another tool, I can use Python. If I want to write something, let's mention a tool, an imaginary tool that has some functionalities, right? I can write the core in Python. It doesn't require DCC. It doesn't require Max or Maya. It's a standalone one. But then I can write a wrapper, an interface for this. Let's say it's a library of calculations. It does like math or whatever, or animation or whatever. I can write a wrapper for it in 3ds Max and call this core and interact with it. The good thing about this is once I'm done, I can do the exact same thing for Maya as well. And then I can do the exact same thing in Blender as well, or any other tool, because it's cross DCC. Basically, every single DCC we have does use Python. And then it's a really clean syntax. You can have proper tools, you can maintain tools, you can this is really important when you go to production. Your code needs to be readable. Someone else needs to be able to read that code, and Python is really clean for that. So those are a few things that MaxScript doesn't do. But then there are things that MaxScript does better than Python. There are some places that MaxScript is faster. So it's not about better, which one is better. It's about which one is right for you. Like when I'm working in 3ds Max, and let's say I have hundreds of nodes I want to rename, I'm not going to use Python. I'm just going to use $name and then enter my name. And that's a Max script which quickly runs and executes and does what I want. So it's about what you're doing.
Interesting, nice, yeah. I guess speaking on that topic, is there, besides I know you work on this project here, I guess maybe it could be personal or maybe in a previous project as well. Are there any other really cool custom tools you built, in either in Python or MaxScript that you want to share, or If not because of permissions, no problem there too, but just curious on that front.
So in terms of personal work, yes, I actually have a few tutorials on YouTube for scripting, especially if you want to know the difference between MaxScript,
Oh, nice.
Python, and C++. I do have a video specifically on that. Actually, was sponsored by Autodesk as well. That's interesting. I wasn't. I did, I forgot I was this involved. And there are many scripts as well that I have. They are mostly the scripts that I wrote when I was learning. So they're not advanced, but there are some tools that are written in Python, and there are tutorials I did for Python. And I do like to make more content on it as well, actually.
Cool, yeah. I mean, we love it. We love the partnership. I think just from seeing all this content you want to share today, it's a lot of great insights you can share too about Max with everyone. Another question too from the audience, so this is from Chris. Has this process been adopted across other titles as a benchmark, or just used singularly within the F1 title?
So at the moment, within F1 title, every title did have their own solution. We did explore them. It didn't apply to us. Uh, Again, I can't specify why, but we did explore those options first because whenever you can use a tech that's already there, it's like not reinventing the wheel. Yeah, you'll go for that. But for our case, we did need this. Like we were sure that the existing tools won't do what we need, and we needed a specific one. So yes, we did check if it's possible to use their tool. It wasn't, and we did it. Hopefully, we will be the one who can give the other titles the tools we developed. Hopefully, it will help them